I want to bring in our guests. We're joined with the one and only KJ No. KJ No is, there we are. There we are. Come on, there we are. KJ No is a lawyer, journalist. Oh, KJ, I'm sorry. I have the wrong bio for you. I have to get the right bio for you. This is my mistake. But KJ is a journalist, academic, if I'm not mistaken, professor even, of the Asia Pacific region. And you are my go-to person for anything that happens in Asia or in the Asia region. Thank you for joining me, man. How you doing this morning? You doing okay? Well, it's not morning for you. Well, it is morning for you. It's 6 a.m. for you.
Yes.
It is morning for you. 6:30.
Yes. Anything for you, Jamal?
Well, yeah. I'm up very early every morning trying to get this stuff straight. But thank you, man. I really appreciate you joining me on this. I have been fascinated by this coup attempt. Just for not the absurdity of it, the balls of when nothing else is going on, he comes out of the blue and says, this is martial law. The other party or my opposition is working with the North Koreans, which is just outrageous. And because they're working with the North Koreans, I need to, ironically, preserve democracy by destroying democracy. And the people, give them credit, they aggressively push back on this. President Young Suk Yeol, they push back on it strongly. He apparently given orders to not allow people into the parliament, despite the fact that under South Korean law, the parliament gets a say in whether or not it goes through, meaning whether or not the martial law goes through. Parliament has the right to potentially vote it down. In this case, Parliament did vote it down, and they were under assault as they were voting it down. You can see the people with the cameras, with the barricades, trying to hold out, I guess, either the military or police that were coming in to try to stop Parliament from making the vote. Like very dramatic scenes in this case. I want to get into your article on this because you wrote this great article for Counterpunch. South Korea's martial law fiasco, legitimate crisis in imperial vassal state. I guess my first question is, do you think this is unrelated from the other either coups or attempted coups taking place around the world, either in Georgia, either in Romania, Syria, or in this case, North Korea? Meaning, did this puppet do this of his own volition, or did he do this because they believe that A, Donald Trump is coming into office, and when Donald Trump comes into office, he will most likely, I don't know, either make amends in Syria. Maybe they think that, like pull the troops out or something like that for good. Make amends with North Korea in the North Korea-South Korea conflict. Like, meaning, do you think that this stuff is all related in some way? That he didn't just do this on a random day at 11 o'clock at night. He did this because there was somewhat of a push for him to do it, knowing that he would get backing as he did it. What is your thoughts on this, KJ?
Yeah, I think there are two ways to, two opinions about this. One is that certainly he was enabled over a period of years to go ahead and do anything that he wanted in Korea. I mean, he has been a dictator, this incredible authoritarian grinding the Korean people down under his boot heel. And this entire period, the US has been touting him as the leader of a pivot state fighting for democracy. So you keep pumping somebody up with that kind of, mendacity, that kind of propaganda, it's going to go to his head. So it's clearly, essentially, he thought that he could ape what his masters are doing all around the world. I think there was a bit of monkey see, monkey do going on here. And it's clear that, martial law means military dictatorship, right? And what he did was he used a backdoor in the Constitution to declare a military dictatorship. And he almost stole home. If it hadn't been for, thousands of people running out, tossing off their pajamas and running out, this would have been fait accompli. But we know that this was deeply planned in South Korea's deep state. And that South Korean deep state is an appendage of the US deep state, of the US national security state. You know, the US created South Korea, they created its military and political institutions, they created the military academy, they form all of the top politicians, and they also control the culture, you know, which is another topic. But the key thing to understand is the South Korean military is an appendage of the US military. It's created by the US, trained by the US. It's military culture training, it's it's uniforms, weapons, rank, command structure, equipment. It's all US. It's a clone of the US military. It's doctrine and war plans. And there's no way that the Korean military would have taken this kind of drastic action, sending in special forces troops into the national security National Assembly building without the U.S. at least knowing about it. Without the U.S. knowing about it, yeah.
Well, the reason why I think it in these terms, because last time Donald Trump was in office, Donald Trump, A, got rid of the troops in Syria. B, he made deals with North Korea, meaning he went to North Korea, and there was this hope that North Korea and South Korea were going to get closer together over the course of that administration. And I remember they did get closer over the course of that administration. Maybe not to the point of ending the war, but definitely closer. And if Donald Trump, if they think for the moment, if they're thinking to themselves, and for the another example is Ukraine. Donald Trump kept saying, I'm going to end the war in Ukraine. Or in each of these cases, you've seen escalation in Ukraine with this idea of trying to Trump-proof Ukraine. At one point, you've seen a dictatorship try to be declared in North Korea, again, under the model that Donald Trump is going to come in and maybe make some kind of deal with North Korea in order to put this issue to bed,
yes.
or at the very least find it again.
Correction, South Korea.
South Korea, I'm sorry. Thank you, South Korea.
South Korea, yes.
Well, I guess my point is Donald Trump was willing to meet with North Korea last time. And I guess my thing is it really that much of a coincidence that all of the places that Donald Trump either had influence or did something last time just so happened just before his administration takes office, all exploded? I don't think there is. And I agree with you. Like, I don't know if they necessarily take that step without telling the US that they're taking that step.
I agree with you. I mean, everywhere where Donald Trump could affect the outcome, we're seeing these drastic, shocking, escalations and changes happening all at once. Yeah. So I don't think that is a coincidence. Specifically in the case of South Korea, Donald Trump had declared that once he becomes president, he's going to change the burden sharing and increase it by 9-fold. What does that mean? South Korea pays about $1.3 billion per year to the US military for the privilege of being occupied. They pay for that privilege. What Donald Trump had said is, I'm going to raise this 9-fold. You're going to pay me $10 billion. That's like 1/5 of South Korea's military budget. You're going to pay that all to me. That would have been a deal breaker. And then Donald Trump could have said, then if you don't, I'm going to withdraw troops, et cetera, et cetera. Now, because they were afraid of that, what they did was they very rapidly redid the agreement so that they would raise it to $1.8 billion per year. And they tried to seal that so that it will stay that way for the next few years. But all of this signals is that Donald Trump sees Korea in a very transactional way, just as he sees Taiwan in a very transactional way. He says, they're going to have to pay insurance to us. We're just an insurance policy. They need to pay us insurance. Same thing with South Korea. He's saying that, South Korea, you want American troops on your soil, you need to pay us more. Now, what he doesn't understand is that it's the U.S. that wants to be there. It's not the South Koreans that want U.S. troops. The South Koreans would be perfectly happy if the U.S. left and if they didn't have to keep paying this, quote, protection. But because the U.S. needs South Korea as a force projection platform against China. It is the greatest force multiplier in this escalation to war against China because it has 500,000 active duty troops and 3.1 million reserve troops. In other words, 3.6 million troops that the United States has eminent domain over, what they call wartime OPCON. The moment the US decides that it wants these troops, it declares DEFCON 3, and then it gets operational control over 3.6 million troops. That's why it wants South Korea. That's why it wants to be present. That's why South Korea is so important. And that's why it always wants heightened tensions with North Korea, because that's just a pretext to escalate and to keep a military presence in order to prepare for war against China. That's the larger context. Donald Trump potentially could have thrown a wrench into those works. It's hard to predict ahead, but this is one scenario that could have been considered. So under those situations, it is not surprising that Yoon, who is one of the most unpopular presidents in South Korean history, he's below 20%, would decide that he was going to declare himself military dictator. Remember, martial law means military dictatorship. And I'm quite certain that if he had been successful, and he almost was, the US would have been, okay, that's okay. They're fine with head choppers. They're fine with fascists and Nazis taking power. I don't think they would have been that upset with Yoon going full military dictatorship, because the US supported military dictatorships for 4 decades on the Korean Peninsula. So this would have not been, something unusual. In fact, this period of liberalization was really a reversion away from the norm.
I'm curious. I was reading your article, and just so the audience can see what I am talking about. And one of the things you question is legitimacy of democracy if this can take place so casually. And I'm saying casually, but if democracy is not so well worn that a leader could come out on I think it was like a Tuesday night or Wednesday night or something like that, just a random night, and say, I am now dictator of South Korea, and even take steps to prevent Parliament from getting a question of that order that he's putting through. That stuff is outrageous. Clearly, he had additional help with it. I think part of the point that you were making, correct me if I'm wrong, is this puppet really a democracy in the clearest sense of the word, in the way that the U.S. touts it as, if this could take place? And to be fair, those people fought for that government, whatever you want to call it, I swear. And even now, apparently, they still don't trust the president, where they are like waiting, there are some parliamentarians that are apparently sleeping in parliament, and you have some people that are kind of staying by in this kind of close protests, because they're not necessarily sure if he's going to do this again and declare martial law again. Give me your take. What were you trying to get to in the article? Am I getting across one of the themes of this article correctly? And if so, great. If not, correct me. But also fill in what I'm missing out in regards to explaining this article.
No, I think that's a pretty good summary. What I'm pointing out is this is a legitimation crisis around South Korea, which was touted as one of the most important and impressive democracies in the world. The US always touts South Korea as a model democracy. It's the teacher's pet of US imperialism. Look what Korea can do: economic development, K-pop, K-drama, Samsung, right? And it wants and needs South Korea as this capitalist show pony. But what is really underneath that facade is that it is a deeply authoritarian state that does its master's wishes. And this is true of many of its vassals, if not all of them. And what we see here is that South Korea's much vaunted democratic system is shown not to be democratic. The code had a backdoor straight into fascist dictatorship, right? And there's a 2-factor ID authentication, which was immediately disabled. And it's only because of the vigilance of the Korean people and literally bodies thrown on the line, bodies thrown against martial law troops, that this coup was thwarted. And as you pointed out, there are people, there are legislators sleeping in the National Assembly because they do not want to be blockaded out like they almost were on Tuesday evening. So it's all being held up by an improvised patch. And now we can see that the coup plotters are preventing a reversion to ordinary processes because they just blocked the impeachment, right? This president is guilty of insurrection, of treason against the government. So they shut down the martial law decree because they were able to do parkour, 60-year-old men doing parkour over the fences, body slamming their ways through, barricades of police. They ran in, they go inside, they see that the paratroopers are coming down with helicopters, and they blockade the national security doors, with, furniture and cabinets. It's like the Paris Commune all over again, I mean, they just pile up so much stuff, and it's just enough to keep the paratroopers from breaking in. And they are able to pass within, 15, 20 minutes, probably the fastest legislative motion in the history of South Korean politics, a rescission, a rebuke of the martial law. But just the fact that this could happen tells you that this is not a democracy. I mean, this could have been fait accompli, if any tiny thing had not happened. And this is a man guilty of insurrection. The president is guilty of insurrection. They were going to vote on impeachment. And when the time to vote on impeachment happened on Saturday, the ruling party, they walked out of the legislative chambers. They turned their back to the people and walked out of the legislative chambers. And there was not quorum enough to actually pass this impeachment of a president guilty of insurrection. And so what that shows us is that right now, the country is in not just a constitutional crisis, it is in a legitimation crisis. And they're saying, oh, we want to do, we don't like what he did either. We agree we have to take the car keys away from this, drunk immediately. But they're not doing the thing that is provided for in the Constitution, which is when you have somebody who has broken the Constitution, president has broken the Constitution, he gets removed. They're saying, we don't want that. We want an orderly transition. And right now, the president is not doing anything. The prime minister and the party leader are, administering the country. But that's not possible because the Constitution does not allow for that. There is no such thing as a kind of informal transfer of power inside the Korean Constitution. If the president is not functioning properly, he resigns or is impeached. And then within 60 days, you have to hold a new election. And that's what they don't want because they don't want to lose power. And the US doesn't want them to lose power because if that happens, all these deals, South Korea, coordinating with Japan and preparing for war against China, all of that could go out the window.
It is astonishing to me that he is not impeached. I swear it is. I mean, meaning if they accept that it was improper for him to try to overthrow the government, then how do they
yes.
Right. How do they create an argument to say that? I mean, even his own party was against them and trying to overthrow the government. So how do they make this kind of argument that, no, we shouldn't take him out of office? Also, I agree with you. We're talking about law, meaning we're not talking about people just subjectively coming up and figuring out doing whatever. If you were at a high school band meeting, okay, fair enough. We're talking about running a country, a major economy. And they're saying, well, the president is not doing anything. We have some other group of people that have come together to do the president's job. It's like, okay, well, I don't know what that is, right?
But
I mean,
that's a coup. That's a coup itself, because,
well,
as I said, there is no provision in the Korean constitution for the president to transfer power to anybody else. And none of these people are elected. The party leader is a private party. He's the leader of a private organization. He has no, mandate to
legitimacy.
rule, legitimacy, and neither does actually the prime minister. The prime minister is just a caretaker, and he takes power for 60 days once the president, it resigns, or, is something happens to him. So this is completely extrajudicial, extra constitutional, extra administrative. It's extraordinary. And the fact that they're trying to justify it under the pretext of that they want an orderly transition, that term orderly transition is a euphemism, meaning that they don't want to give up power. And they don't.
I'm sorry, when is the next election, by the way?
Well, the next election would happen in 3 years.
Whoa.
But yes, exactly, right? Whoa. This is like, so he served 2 years, and it's a 5-year term. So there would be another 3 years. But as I said again, in the United States, you have the 20th Amendment. There is orderly succession. You complete the term, with the vice president or the Speaker of the House. The South Korean structure doesn't have a vice president. You only have new elections, and those new elections have to happen within 60 days. So right now we are in completely uncharted territory. It's like what Zelensky is doing in Ukraine. It's like complete. I mean, essentially, this is already a coup. The fact that they didn't impeach him means they have already implemented a coup.
The cops are apparently looking into or investigating him, correct? Is he being investigated currently for crimes against the South Korean government?
Yes, he is technically being investigated. According to the police, they put 150 investigators on his tail, and they're investigating for insurrection. Any other crime, he could claim presidential immunity because he is still the president. But he's being investigated for insurrection. The problem is, we don't think that he can be properly investigated because the police, the chief of police was involved in this coup. He transmitted the orders for, the police to cordon off the National Assembly. And then there's also a separate investigating body, which is the prosecutor's office. And they want also to investigate him because they say, the police brass are also subjects or should be subjects of investigation. But the thing is, the prosecutor's office is actually controlled by the president. The president was the former chief prosecutor. And when he was elected, he said that he would turn the country into a country of prosecutors, which he did. And he used the prosecutorial body as simply his private army to go after everybody. And so they want to get involved as well. And there's a bit of a turf fight between these two agencies. But all of that signals that this investigation is not going to work. And as I said, we're looking at a serious constitutional crisis as well as a foundational legitimation crisis. That said, they have put an exit ban on the president, which is, once again, astounding. He's the first sitting president who's been told that he cannot, exit the country. So the absurdities just pile up and up and up.
How in the world does that work? How do you can you imagine a head of state not being able to visit another country or another head of state because he's being investigated by the cops? Just astonishing.
Exactly.
You don't believe the investigation is going to work. Meaning you believe that the way to deal with this is constitutionally through impeachment, and that the federal, the legal system is not going to be able to go after him in the way that. Well, I guess that's the other question.
So he's still president. You see, he's still president. He's still the sitting president. He has all the full powers of the sitting president. And
can a president be
So
investigated? Meaning,
if
can they take him
yeah,
out of office if he's convicted, for example?
this is unknown territory.
I
This is
see.
unknown territory. But more than that, because he is still the sitting president, he could simply declare martial law again. He is the a commander in chief of the military. He could simply tell the military, we don't agree with that. He can still declare another martial law. So all of this is, it's just a complete fiasco. It's a foundational legitimation crisis. And as I said once again, it just puts the lie that this is some kind of model democracy. It's like a Potemkin state that was propped up because it was an important US vassal, US threat projection platform, US force multiplier, US base against China.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's like Israel, right? I mean, don't want to overuse that,
Mhm.
but just as Israel gets away with anything, South Korea gets away with anything. And genocide, South Korea is built on genocide. I mean, in 1948, full blown genocide happened. Hundreds of thousands of people just wiped out. If you dig anywhere in Korea, you are going to run into a mass grave. I mean, you're the longest mass grave in in the world is in South Korea. I think it's like 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers long, and they have at least 150 sites that have been unexcavated but are considered to be mass graves. So the entire country was built on genocide by the United States. As I said, it's an appendage of Washington. And they've declared martial law 12 times. This is the 13th time. Each time they declare martial law, it's some kind of massive travesty. I mean, it is the most, when you say martial law declaration or emergency martial law declaration in the Korean language, it is the most frightening phrase in the Korean lexicon, in the Korean dictionary. Everybody goes back immediately to images of mass graves, beatings, torture, disappearances. That's what the Koreans were afraid was happening, that this was just Groundhog Day for them. And that's why people rushed out, at 10:30, and they went so fast that they were able to arrive at the National Security Building before the special forces and their helicopters were able to blockade it. That's how fast they were doing. Like I said, 60-year-old parliamentarians doing parkour, not just one, multiple parliamentarians doing parkour over the national security fences in order to get inside the building and blockade themselves and
Last
vote.
question, KJ. Who else associated with the president was involved in this? He couldn't have done this by himself. I mean, the fact that the military was going to the parliament kind of gave some level of indication that someone else had to be involved in what he was doing.
Yeah, we think that there are a bunch of them, but probably the most important or influential person was the Minister of Defense,
Mm.
and who's a very, very close, high school buddy of his. And then the Minister of Interior, and then the Minister of Security, National Security, and then the Defense Security Command. They've given it another name, but this is kind of like the intelligence security force. And they had these plans, and it's come out now that they had plans for a second day. They were going to move paratroopers from the south into the capital. Huge military mobilization and movements, which means that the US had to have known, because you can't do that kind of huge movement because it's such a crowded dance floor with all these weapons pointed at each other. So the moment you do any kind of military movement, you have to notify the command authority, which is the CNC, CFC, USFK commander, which is the United States. That would have gone to US, Joint Command leader, and then that would have gone up to Indo-PACOM, that would have gone to the Joint Chiefs, that would have gone all the way up to the White House. And that is why I think that as the coup was happening, the United States didn't condemn it.
Mm-mm.
They
They said
said,
we're watching.
we're watching, and South Korea is one of our closest allies, right? That's all they could say. We know that there were follow-up plans on this coup. It was planned with intricate detail. It was a huge mobilization. They were going to arrest 11 parliamentarians, including the head of his own party, and take them away to like a black site. So this was ugly, ugly stuff, pure insurrection, pure treason. And yet, the US approaches, okay, you do your thing. That's fine. We didn't see anything, or, you are still our best buddy. We're still with you.
That is, KJ, that's astonishing, man. I agree with you. I don't believe for a moment that these things are unrelated. And I strongly suspect that a lot of this has to do with Trump, like meaning their perspective of what Trump may do, and they're receding into the rest of the world, this kind of multipolar world. But KJ, man, thank you for this. KJ, no, he's a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. He's contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It is now available at iacenter.org. KJ, man, always appreciate you. Thank you for this. I really appreciate your analysis.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. And you can find me on the China Report on the Breakthrough News Network.
China Report. Okay. On the Breakthrough News Network. I'm going to write that down. Thank you, KJ. Have a good one, man. Be safe.
Thank you.
All right. We have come to the end of the show. I want to thank all of you. KJ is awesome. Look, man, I really do believe that this is. Look, the reason why I say that, if you think of what Trump did last time, he made a deal with North Korea in order to stop the missiles from firing. He went to Syria and he effectively pulled the troops out of Syria, basically ending Obama regime change war, even though he stole the oil. And if you're thinking of Europe in general, let's say the EU, for example, well, Joe Biden is losing the war in Ukraine, but just it's obvious at this point. Somebody would have to be cultish to not think that Ukraine is failing miserably. Hell, even Zelensky himself point out that he doesn't have the power in order to do anything, in order to stem the Russian events. And so if you're thinking of Georgia as a second front, and you're looking at it, even when they offered NATO membership, if you remember back in 2008, Georgia was one of the countries that was listed with the US associated with Ukraine. So you get a Georgian government that is becoming far more skeptical of Europe than it was prior, meaning Europe feels like it's losing Georgia. And their response is, well, the only way you have a democracy if you fall in with the European Union. And then you get Romania, who you get a Eurosceptic who also is looking for Romanian interests and say us being a part of this war is not in Romanian interests. And Europe comes in and says, well, this election, we don't believe that the election was fair, so you guys need to run the election over again. The court even comes through and say, we think there were TikTok videos, and because there were TikTok videos that amplified the campaign, we are going to run this election over again, basically killing the fact that the guy won and was most likely going to win the second election that night. And so if indeed Trump touches at the very least these other items, North Korea, and Trump touches Syria, then maybe it's not that much of a coincidence that Syria gets killed just before Trump gets in office, something that Trump might have pulled out of or not having anything to do with. And North Korea, maybe it's the feeling that it can't necessarily be trusted to toe the line completely if indeed it was a democracy as opposed to being a dictatorship. The US didn't seem to complain about the fact that the guy was overthrowing the government. So I would imagine if they didn't complain, maybe they were on board with the fact that he was doing it. I don't know. I mean, you can only see what's involved and only from below, as Cannabis put it. But look, I'm going to end this. We have one chat for today, Mama Thomas. Let's see what Mama Thomas is saying. Jamal, great guess. Whatever is going on in the world, you always have someone who knows what's going on. Keep up the good work. Well, Mama Thomas, I appreciate you giving me accolades and all that good stuff. Some people might say you're biased in this case, but I don't believe you're biased at all. But look, I'm going to end this. Guys, I'm going to say like, share, subscribe. You can always support this work through PayPal or Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chat. All stickers will be read, provided you're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. If you dig the content, definitely give it a like. And like I said, share it far and wide. My objective is to reach 40,000 by the end of the year. Damn it, I think I can do it. I can do it with your help. So definitely share this content, like this video, and I will see you guys at the worst or at the latest, bright and early tomorrow morning. You guys have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Signing off.